in the last 5 minutes. Such statements should be made available whenever possible at 9:30 a.m. when they are relevant to the debate like today. It is doubly important that they are available in good time. I'm sorry this has happened, and I consider it discourteous to the House. I hope this is not the new government in the way that it intends to treat the House. I'm going to take it down as bad management or incompetence rather than deliberate. Right, we now come to the general debate on UK energy costs. Before I call the Prime Minister to open the debate, I would like to point... Just a minute. I don't think that's the day today after the way this House has been treated. I'm defending you as the backbenchers. I expect a little bit more decorum at this stage. Before I call the Prime Minister to open the debate, I would like to point out the British Sign Language interpretation of the opening speech in the debate is available to watch on Parliament Live TV. I now call the Prime Minister. Mr.
Speaker, I beg to move the motion. Earlier this week...
Prime Minister, just 1 second. We've started the debate. I don't want any more from that particular bench. If we do, I go and get that cup of tea early. Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move the motion. Earlier this week, I promised I would deal with the soaring energy prices faced by families and businesses across the UK. And today I am delivering on that promise. This government is moving immediately to introduce a new energy price guarantee that will give people certainty on energy bills. It will curb inflation and boost growth. This guarantee, which includes a temporary suspension of green levies, means that from the 1st of October, a typical household will pay no more than £2,500 per year for each of the next 2 years while we get the energy market back on track. This will save a typical household £1,000 a year. It comes in addition to the £400 energy bill support scheme. This guarantee supersedes the Ofgem price cap and has been agreed with energy retailers. We will deliver this. Mr. Speaker, I will make way in a few minutes when I have made some progress. Mr. Speaker, we will deliver this by securing the wholesale price for energy while putting in place long-term measures to secure future supplies at more affordable rates. We are supporting this country through this winter and next, and tackling the root causes of high prices so we are never in the same position again. For those using heating oil, living in park homes, or those on heat networks, we will set up a fund so that all can...
Prime Minister, sorry about this. Can I just say, I don't want a running commentary from here and giving me the advice. I certainly don't need it. Prime Minister, I don't want to interrupt you. It's up to you to give way when you feel it's appropriate. But just to let you know that it is now being printed, the WMS, and I'm hoping that we'll bring it into the chamber for everybody to see. Prime Minister.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. For those using heating oil, living in park homes, or those on heat networks, we will set up a fund so that all UK consumers can benefit from equivalent support.
I thank her for giving me. National Energy Action estimate with the cap at the current level are 6.5 million households in fuel poverty. So raising the cap to £2,500, how many more millions of people will end up in fuel poverty, does she reckon?
Well, Mr. Speaker, we are taking action to help people on the lowest incomes through universal credit, and we are also supplying £400 through the Energy Bills Support Scheme. Mr. Speaker, I would like to make some progress and then I will take more interventions. We will also support all businesses, charities and public sector organisations with their energy costs this winter, offering an equivalent guarantee for 6 months. After those 6 months, we will provide further support to vulnerable sectors such as hospitality, including our local pubs. My right honourable friend, the Business Secretary, will work with business to review where this should be targeted to make sure those most in need get support. This review will be concluded within 3 months, giving businesses certainty. In the meantime, companies with the wherewithal need to be looking for ways they can improve energy efficiency and increase direct energy generation. I will give way to my honourable friend.
I'm grateful to the Prime Minister giving way, and I commend her on the speed with which she and her new team really grip this challenge that's facing the country. And doesn't it demonstrate, Mr. Speaker, that Conservative governments do not stand by while millions of people on low incomes are threatened? The measures she's taken.
Well, my honourable friend is absolutely right. I recognise that people are struggling with their energy bills, and that is why I have brought forward this debate as soon as possible to give people reassurance ahead of this winter that energy bills are going to be affordable. And we will be bringing forward emergency legislation to deliver this policy. My right honourable friend, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, will set out the expected costs as part of his fiscal statement later this month. And I can tell the House today that we will not be giving in to the Leader of the Opposition who calls for this to be funded through a windfall tax. That would undermine the national interest by discouraging the very investment we need to secure homegrown energy supplies. If the honourable members will allow me to make a bit more progress, I may be able to answer their questions before they've asked them. But, Mr. Speaker, the party opposite need to understand...
Prime Minister. Sorry, Prime Minister. A point of order, Kevin Brennan.
Copies have been made available to some members of the written ministerial statement, but there aren't enough for everybody. Is it possible, if I might finish this point of order, is it possible that sufficiently so that we can all see it?
As we both know, it's not a point of order, but it's certainly a clarification that they're now coming out, and we're printing them as fast as possible to make sure all members have the ability to read it. It is with great disappointment, but that's a matter of fact. Prime Minister. Prime Minister.
Instead of that approach, we are taking an approach which is pro-growth, pro-business, and pro the investment we need for our country's energy security. I will give way.
Very grateful to the Prime Minister. Does she agree that we are too short of energy but have plenty of taxes? And does she agree that if we had an oversupply of taxes, as the party opposite wants, we'd have less supply of the things we were taxing?
My right honourable friend makes an extremely good point. The reality is we can't tax our way to growth. And the policy I am setting out today is all about helping people with their energy costs, as I promised, and making sure that we have the long-term energy supplies that we need for our country. I'll give way to the honourable gentleman at the back.
Thank you to the Prime Minister for giving way. Just 6 months ago, households faced energy bills of £1,300. We are today being told that fixing prices at £2,500 is the best that the government can do. It's not. So why is the Prime Minister putting private energy profits ahead of people at this crucial time?
Well, what we are doing is we're doing the important work to help people and businesses get through this winter and next winter, whilst fixing Britain's long-term energy supplies. I've already given way a number of occasions. I will give way later. Please hold off for a bit longer. Mr. Speaker, this is the moment to be bold. We are facing a global energy crisis, and there are no cost-free options. There will be a cost to this intervention. I will give way.
I strongly welcome this package of bills to help cover. It's a marked contrast to the meagre scrappings offered by the benches opposite. Can she? I just welcome also that she's confirmed that schools and colleges will get help with their energy bills, as the colleges face increases of 300%. And could I just finally ask her, will she continue to bear down on fuel duty? Because we know that motorists at the pumps face extortionate bills when they fill up their cars.
Well, I thank my honourable friend for his point, and I'm sure the Chancellor of the Exchequer is listening intently to his point ahead of his fiscal statement later this month. Mr. Speaker, I want to make some progress on explaining how we will defray the cost of this intervention, which I think might answer some of the honourable people's questions before they ask them. So the way we are going to defray the cost of this intervention is first of all by ramping up supply. Following on from the successful vaccine task force, we have created a new energy supply task force under the leadership of Maddie McTernan. They are already negotiating new long-term energy contracts with domestic and international gas suppliers to immediately bring down the cost of intervention. We are also accelerating all sources of domestic energy, including North Sea oil and gas production. We will be launching a new licensing round, which we expect to lead to over 100 new licences being awarded. And we will speed up our deployment of all clean and renewable technologies, including hydrogen, solar, carbon capture and storage, and wind, where we are already a world leader in offshore generation. Renewable and nuclear generators will move on to contracts for difference to end the situation where electricity prices are set by the marginal price of gas. This will mean that generators are receiving a fair price, reflecting their cost of production, further bringing down the cost of this intervention. I will give way to my honourable friend.
I warmly welcome the immediate action announced by the Prime Minister on the cost of energy, which is really going to help families in the Pendle constituency and right across the United Kingdom. Next week in Parliament is Nuclear Week, so will she join with me in supporting the rollout of small modular reactors championed by Rolls-Royce, who have 2 sites in my constituency? We need this technology now, so will she go further and faster to drive forward the nuclear programme in this country?
Well, my honourable friend is absolutely right. Small modular reactors are a very important part of our energy mix. They're produced here in the United Kingdom. They will help boost growth as well as boost our energy security. And secondly, I will take a few more interventions in a few minutes, but please let me make progress on my speech. Secondly, today's actions will deliver substantial benefits to our economy, boosting growth, which increases tax receipts and gives certainty to business. This intervention is expected to curb inflation by up to 5 percentage points, bringing a reduction in the cost of servicing government debt. Thirdly, I'm announcing today that with the Bank of England, we will set up a new scheme worth up to £40 billion to ensure that firms operating in the wholesale energy market have the liquidity they need to manage price volatility. This will stabilise the market and decrease the likelihood that energy retailers need our support, like they did last winter, by increasing supply, boosting the economy and increasing liquidity in the market. We will significantly reduce the cost to government of this intervention. I will give way.
Very kind of the Prime Minister to give way to so many sensible members. Today is clearly a big intervention, and the government is, as she promised, wrapping its arms around my constituents, as we did during the pandemic. and looking to the future, can she confirm that the plans are primarily about domestic supply rather than imported reliance, and therefore in line with the commitments, the important commitments that we made at COP26 in Glasgow and the path to net zero that we made in our manifesto 3 years ago?
Well, I am completely committed to net zero by 2050, and I'll be saying, as well as dealing with the immediate situation we face, we are also dealing with the root causes. I'll give way to the honourable gentleman.
Very grateful for Prime Minister Way, and can I welcome her to her place and hope she will work with opposition parties in the national interest. But can she confirm that her announcement today will still see the energy bills of struggling families rising by another £500 next month, and that this winter they will be paying energy bills twice the bills that they paid last winter?
Well, we're also, at the same time as introducing the energy price guarantee, also providing families with £400 and providing extra support to the vulnerable. So vulnerable families will be receiving that extra support. But, Mr. Speaker, I want to move on to why we are in the situation we are in now. And the fact is that energy policy over the past decades has not focused enough on securing supply. There is no better. I don't know why, Mr. Speaker, I don't know why the honourable gentleman is laughing. He is partly responsible for this. There is no better example than nuclear, where the UK has not built a single new nuclear reactor in 25 years. And it's not just about supply. The regulatory structures have failed, exposing the problems of having a price cap applied to retail but not to the wholesale market. All of this has left us vulnerable to volatile global markets and malign actors in an increasingly geopolitical world. And that is why Putin is exploiting this situation by weaponising energy supplies as part of his illegal war on Ukraine. I'll give way to the honourable gentleman.
Would she accept that with 150 years' worth of gas under the ground in GB, it is absolute madness to turn our back on that resource at a time when people are facing huge energy bills? And could she also just explain to us how she intends to deliver the support which she's talking about in Northern Ireland?
That's the people from Ireland.
Well, I do agree with the honourable gentleman. I'm coming to the point about shale gas in a minute, but I can assure him that this policy will apply in Northern Ireland, and those benefits will be open to the people of Northern Ireland as part of the United Kingdom. So, as well as the action that I am announcing today, we will use these 2 years ahead of us to make sure that the United Kingdom is never in this situation again. So I will be launching 2 reviews. Firstly, a review of energy regulation to fix the underlying problems. We want a new approach which will address supply and affordability for the long term. Secondly, we will conduct a review to ensure we deliver net zero by 2050 in a way that is pro-business and pro-growth. And this review will be led by my right honourable friend, the member for Kingswood. I will give way.
Can I firstly, on behalf of the people of South Leicestershire, welcome my right honourable friend to her role. She mentions Putin. Whilst the measures that she's announcing today are incredibly welcome for my constituents and all our constituents to protect, and particularly the poorest and most vulnerable in society, will she give an assurance today that her government will continue to stand firm against the appalling and brutal actions of Putin and his thuggish regime? And will she tell the British people honestly that we are in for a difficult winter notwithstanding the challenges that face us?
Well, my honourable friend is right. The reason we are in this difficult situation is because of Putin's appalling war in Ukraine. But we do need to make sure that our energy supplies are more resilient and more secure, so we are never in this situation again, and we cannot be subject to global energy prices and the actions of dictators.
We would be if we listened to you.
We are delivering a stable environment that gives investors the confidence to back gas as part of our transition to net zero. It is vital that we take steps to increase our domestic energy supply. I'll make a bit more progress and then I will give way. We will end the moratorium on extracting our huge reserves of shale, which could get gas flowing as soon as 6 months, where there is local support for it. We will launch Great British Nuclear later this month, putting us on a path to deliver up to a quarter of our electricity generation with nuclear by 2050. I'll give way to the Honourable Lady.
To the Prime Minister. Last September, I asked the then Business Secretary why the government signed off on the closure of the rough gas storage facility. He dismissed it as not relevant and he accused me of stoking panic and alarm. Given the government are now reportedly reopening that facility, it doesn't suggest the new Chancellor is a man of foresight and strategy, does it, Prime Minister?
We are in a very, very difficult situation, and I am committed, as Prime Minister, to doing everything it takes to resolve this situation, to help people with their energy bills, and to make sure we have security of supply for the long term. I've already taken a lot of interventions. I need to make progress on this speech. As a result of these steps on shale and on nuclear, and the acceleration of renewables, I am today setting a new ambition for our country. Far from being dependent on the global energy market and the actions of malign actors, we will make sure that the UK is a net energy exporter by 2040. And my right honourable friend, the Business Secretary, will set out a plan in the next 2 months to make sure we achieve this. Mr. Speaker, I know that businesses and families are very concerned about how they will get through this winter. That is why I felt it was important to act urgently to provide immediate help and support, as well as setting out our plan about how we are going to secure the UK's future energy supplies. This is part of my vision for rebuilding our economy. Secure energy supply is vital to growth and prosperity, yet it has been ignored for too long. I will end the UK's short-termist approach to energy security and supply once and for all. That is what I promised on the steps of Downing Street. Today, we are acting decisively on that pledge. This will help us build a stronger, more resilient and more secure United Kingdom. I commend this motion to the House.
There's a lot of members who wish to get in, so think of others after we've got through the front benches. I now come to the Leader of the Opposition, Keir Starmer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and can I thank the Prime Minister for advance sight of our opening speech. We're in the middle of a national emergency. People are really scared, and families don't know if they can warm their homes this winter, and businesses ask if they can keep the lights on. That is why the Labour Party spent the summer fighting for a price freeze, so that no household would pay a penny more on their bills. When we called for it, many people said we were wrong. They pretended that this crisis was something that just affected the poorest, as if working families on average wages could easily shoulder astronomical bills. They dismissed our call for support as handouts. But those objections could never last. The Prime Minister had no choice. No government can stand by while millions of families fall into poverty, whilst businesses shut their doors and the economy falls to ruin. So I am pleased there is action today. and that the principle of a price limit has been accepted. But under our plan, not a penny more on bills. Under this plan, a price rise. But this support... I'll just make some progress and then I will. But this support does not come cheap. And the real question before the House today, the real question the government faces, the political question, is who is going to pay? The Treasury estimates that energy producers could make £170 billion in unexpected windfall profits over the next 2 years. I repeat that, £170 billion in unexpected windfall profits over the next 2 years. I will give way in just a moment. The head of BP has called this crisis a cash machine for his company, and households are on the other end of that cash machine, their bills funding these eye-watering profits. That's why we've been calling for a windfall tax since January, and it's why we want to see the windfall tax expanded now. But the Prime Minister is opposed to windfall taxes. She wants to leave these vast profits on the table with one clear and obvious consequence: the bill will be picked up by working people. She claims that a windfall tax will deter investment. That's ridiculous. These vast profits are not the reward of careful planning. They are the unexpected windfall from Putin's barbarity in Ukraine. There is no reason why taxing them would affect investment in the future. Don't just take my word for it. Asked which investment BP would cancel if there was a windfall tax, the chief executive said none. None. His words, not mine. So the Prime Minister's only argument against the windfall tax falls apart at first inspection, laying bare that she's simply driven by dogma, and it's working people that will pay for that dogma. I will give way.
Does he accept that this government has already introduced a windfall tax, and energy companies today are paying 65% on their profits? What would he rather see that tax set at?
We'll be happy until it's 100%. He wants 100%.
We're talking about what happens this winter and next. And if he doesn't understand, I'll tell him so. Every pound the Prime Minister's government refuses to raise in windfall taxes, when she's leaving billions on the table, is an extra pound of borrowing. That's the simple, straightforward argument. Every pound she leaves on the table is an extra pound of borrowing, loading the burden of the cost of living crisis onto working people who will have to pay back for years to come.
Will my right honourable friend?
I will.
I'm grateful to my right honourable friend. The Prime Minister has been careful to frame her guarantee in terms of her refusal to tax. But is she not going to have a problem explaining to the British people how a levy on their bills in the future to repay the borrowing is not actually a tax?
Yes. I'm grateful for that intervention. This is the basic political divide. They want to protect the excess profits of the oil and gas and energy group, the excess profits. We want to protect working people. Mr. Speaker, I will give way.
I'm very grateful to him for giving way, and this Saturday myself and many members of the Chesterfield Labour Party will be out meeting voters in Chesterfield, and if any of them haven't been paying attention this week, they might still say you're all the same. But isn't it absolutely clear now that there is a clear divide? Every voter that I knock on the door, they will know political parties have a choice. They've chosen to be on the side of the energy generators. We've chosen to be on the side of bill payers.
Well, I'm grateful for that, and I'll be absolutely amazed if members opposite haven't picked this up. Ask voters whether they think that it's fair that they pick up the bill, or those companies that made profits they didn't expect to make, and there's only one answer to that question. It's a very simple question of whose side are you on? And I'm afraid this isn't a one-off, because not only is the Prime Minister refusing to extend the windfall tax, she is also choosing to cut corporation tax. An extra £17 billion in tax cuts for companies that are already doing well. That means handing a tax cut to the water companies polluting our beaches, handing tax cuts to the banks, handing a tax cut to Amazon. She's making that choice, even though households and public services need every penny they can get. Working people are paying for the cost of living crisis. Stroke victims wait an hour for an ambulance, and criminals walk the streets with impunity. It's the wrong choice for working people. It's the wrong choice for Britain. I will give way.
I thank my right honourable friend, and it seems that the government has decided to deal with this energy crisis off the backs of ordinary, hard-working Brits and load huge levels of debt on future generations rather than properly taxing the billions of pounds of excess profits for energy companies. Why is this government on the side of big corporates rather than being on the side of ordinary, hard-working Brits? Is it because the Prime Minister is a former employee of Shell and is therefore on the side of oil and gas companies and is not protecting ordinary working British people?
Well, I'm grateful for that intervention, and it does come down to this basic point. Everybody in this House recognises that profits are needed for investment in all businesses. But in this case, these are unexpected profits that were not expected to make. And when the Chief Executive of BP says this will not deter any investment, it's a bit rich for the opposite to say he's completely wrong. He is the Chief Executive of BP. He's made his case. It's the complete opposite of the case that the Prime Minister is trying to make. Now, Mr. Speaker, the immediate cause of, I will in a moment, the immediate cause of this energy crisis is Putin's grotesque invasion of Ukraine. We stand united in our support for Ukraine. If we're to defend democracy, defeat imperialism and preserve security on the continent, Putin's aggression must fail. And whatever our political differences, the Prime Minister will always have my full support in that common endeavour. But we must ask ourselves, why are we so exposed to changes in the international price of oil and gas? Why are we so at the mercy of dictators, able to pull the plug on wells and shut down pipelines? Why is there such a fundamental flaw in our national security? I will give way in just a moment. I'll make my argument, then I will give way. It's about a failure to prepare, a failure to increase our energy independence, a failure to rapidly decrease our reliance on fossil fuels. They banned, Mr. Speaker, they banned onshore wind in 2015. That cost us clean energy capacity equivalent to all our Russian gas imports in recent years. A policy disaster. The Prime Minister has been constantly opposed to solar power, the cheapest form of energy that we have, and she's been consistently wrong. And it's not just what the Prime Minister said in the heat of her leadership campaign this summer. When she was Environment Secretary, the government slashed solar subsidies. The market crashed. I will give way.
To the right honourable gentleman, but the Leader of the Opposition is being completely misleading, if I may say so, because what he said, it's under this government that the United Kingdom has the second highest offshore wind generation capacity anywhere in the world. And how is that created? It's through investment by companies. This government will allow for that to happen.
Well, I take it from that intervention that he doesn't quarrel with me that the ban on onshore wind since 2015 has been a policy disaster, along with the opposition to solar power. Forgive me, I saw the former Prime Minister raising it. I will take her intervention, of course.
Thank you. I'm grateful to the right honourable gentleman for giving way. He's talking about lack of preparation for energy security for the United Kingdom. In that case, if Labour is so worried about lack of preparation, why did they not build any new nuclear capacity?
Mr. Speaker, I'm grateful for that intervention. Let me deal with it in full, because it's a very important point, because nuclear is vital to our future and a new generation of power plants should have been built by now. Yesterday, the Prime Minister tried desperately to blame Labour, and that intervention goes to this point. I remember the exchange across this dispatch box in 2006 in which Prime Minister Blair said, "I'm pro-nuclear." And the Leader of the Opposition, David Cameron, didn't know where to look. If you haven't seen the clip, have a look. I'm pro-nuclear. David Cameron didn't know where to look. The uncomfortable truth for members opposite is this. The last Labour government gave the go-ahead for new nuclear sites in 2009. In the 13 long years since then, not one has been completed. Let me turn to home insulation, which I will give way.
To the right honourable gentleman. Tony Blair may have said he was pro-nuclear, but he didn't actually build any nuclear power stations. Let me ask him about the windfall tax. The £170 billion he talks about, from my understanding, most of that is not profits of UK companies. It's energy supplied to the United Kingdom, but it's not within our ability to tax it. And secondly, we already have a windfall tax. We're already taxing those profits at 65%. How high does he want a windfall tax to go?
On the question of 2006, I think I'll give way to him again. What was his party's position in 2006 when David Cameron was asked the question on nuclear? Because he didn't have a position on it. But on the £170 billion that he raises, I think he's wrong about that. But if there is any doubt, I'd invite the Treasury to disclose the documents about this so that we can all see them and evaluate them. Because I think I'm right and I think he's wrong. But if the documents could be made available, we can all look at that £170 billion. Mr. Speaker, I will give way.
But isn't the bigger point that there's a simple choice about how you pay for it? It either all goes on borrowing and ordinary families and on the never-never for this country, or at least some of it is charged in a windfall tax on unearned and unexpected income, which Putin has basically put into the pockets of Shell and BP. That's the fundamental choice, isn't it?
That is the fundamental choice. It's the fundamental divide in this House. Let them defend their position to protect those excess profits, and we will defend our position of standing up for working people. I'm going to make some progress. Mr. Speaker, I've taken a lot of intervention. I'm going to make some progress. Let me turn to home insulation, which reduces energy consumption like nothing else. We have the draftiest homes in Europe. The last Labour government set about fixing that. Then the party opposite said, cut the green crap, and the whole project all but collapsed. Installation rates down by 92%. Utterly short-sighted. And it's costing millions of households £1,000 a year on their energy bills right now. The Prime Minister is right to recognise that immediate support needs to be combined with longer-term action. But I'm afraid fracking and a dash for gas in the North Sea will not cut bills, nor strengthen our energy security, but they will drive a coach and horses through our efforts to fight the looming climate crisis. She should listen to her own Chancellor sitting next to her. What did the Chancellor have to say about this just a few months ago? Now, this is quite a long quote, See the Chancellor leaning forward. I've tried to cut it down. But every sentence is worth repeating of what the Chancellor said just a few months ago. His words. For those calling for its return, they misunderstand the situation we find ourselves in. If we lifted the fracking moratorium, it would take up to a decade to extract sufficient volumes, and it would come at a high price for communities and our precious countryside. His words. I'll go on because this is so good. Second, he said just a few months ago, no amount of shale gas from hundreds of wells dotted across rural England would be enough to lower the European price any time soon. And he went on. And with the best will in the world, private companies are not going to sell shale gas they produce to UK consumers below the market price. They are not charities. Spot on, Chancellor. And what did the Chancellor at the same time have to say about North Sea gas? Additional North Sea production won't materially affect the wholesale price. Indeed, earlier this year, his previous department helpfully put out a series of Mythbusters, a government myth-busting document. Here's one of them. Chancellor, your document. Myth. Extracting more North Sea gas lowers prices. Answer. Fact. UK production isn't large enough to materially impact on the global price of gas. I've got a copy for the Prime Minister. We do need to carefully manage our existing resources in the North Sea, and the industry has an important role to play in our future as we transition to a different form of energy. But doubling down on fossil fuels is a ludicrous answer to a fossil fuel crisis. And if all countries took the approach advocated by her new Energy Secretary of squeezing every single drop out of their fossil fuel reserves, global temperatures will rise by a catastrophic 3 degrees. That will be devastating for our planet and future generations. And it's totally unnecessary. Now, I'm going to make some progress because I do think other speakers need to get in. New wind and solar power are now 9 times cheaper than gas. 9 times cheaper. So we need a clean energy sprint, urgently accelerating the rollout of offshore wind, onshore wind, solar, nuclear, hydrogen and tidal. And last year, I set out a new national mission to insulate 19 million homes and cut bills for good. If the government had taken me up on that challenge, 2 million homes would already be insulated this winter. Britain needs a fresh start. We need a government that will never leave working people to pick up the tab for excess profits of the energy industry. We need a government that plans for the long term, rather than leaving us badly exposed to the whims of dictators. And we need a government that will drive us forward to energy independence, rather than doubling down on fossil fuels. The change we need is not the 4th Tory Prime Minister in 6 years, it's a Labour government. Thank you.
Theresa May.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I refer the House to my entry in the Members' Register. Can I first of all congratulate my right honourable friend on acting so swiftly to bring forward a package of support for people with their energy bills. There's no doubt, as every member of this House knows, that this is a matter of real concern for people in my constituency and every other constituency who've been concerned about how they're going to heat their homes, and indeed businesses worried about how they can continue to run their businesses. May I also welcome the fact that my right honourable friend has coupled action on energy bills with action on energy security. The vicious further invasion of Ukraine by Russia has indeed shown the necessity of us having our own energy security, although it makes sense anyway. We have made important progress in this over recent years. I refer, of course, to the investment in Hinkley Point C, and I again welcome the commitment that my right honourable friend and the government have made to continuing that commitment to support nuclear energy. And as I pointed out in my intervention, just wait a second. It's more than 1 second, but anyway. As I pointed out in my intervention to the Right Honourable Leader of the Opposition, and was emphasised by the excellent intervention by my Right Honourable friend, the Member for Forest of Dean, In 13 years of government, whatever the then leader of the Labour Party might have said, they did not build any new capability. I'll give way to
I thank her for giving way. On Hinkley Point C, it's going to be at least 4 years late, possibly 5 years late. It's nearly 50% over budget, and EDF have got an eye-watering and 35-year contract for a strike rate at £92.50 per megawatt, compared to roughly £40 per megawatt for just 15 years in onshore and offshore wind. She should have scrapped Hinkley Point C when she had the chance, shouldn't she?
Can I say to the honourable gentleman that it's high time that Scottish nationalists actually came up with some practical solutions to these issues, rather than rejecting everything that the government suggests. I give forward.
I'm very grateful to the former Prime Minister. You know, we're all trying to find energy security. Can I say to her and say to the government front bench, what we should be doing is prioritising tidal. There's an excellent Royal Society report from last year that indicates we can get to 11.5 gigawatts. I'm asking the government to enhance the ring-fence pot from 20 to 50 million. You'll get the baseload you need, and you won't need nuclear energy.
Say to the right honourable gentleman, this is actually a rather strange point in my political career, because I actually agree with him about the importance of tidal. And can I also say to him that when I was Prime Minister, I looked very closely, over a significant period of time, at proposals, particularly for the Severn Estuary, and unfortunately, at that time, the price that would have had to have been guaranteed in relation to cost to the consumer was too high. Of course, looking at it today, it could be a very different picture. Now, my right honourable friend outlined a number of steps that the government is taking, and I look forward to seeing the full details of these. But I would like to suggest there are some other measures which will address energy prices and energy security, while capitalising on our high-growth tech sectors, and would also help us to meet our domestic and international climate change obligations. Because there are measures that will save people money that will also help to save the planet. The UK has already shown that you don't have to choose between low emissions and economic growth. You can have both. To achieve net zero, we will need to remove the country's dependence on fossil fuels. My right honourable friend announced a net zero review. Perhaps when he sums up this debate, the Secretary of State could indicate how that net zero review will fit in with the net zero strategy, which the government published in advance of COP26 and which many are already working on. So while my right honourable friend has acted swiftly and correctly to help people over these difficult times, it does make sense to accelerate our transition to a low-carbon energy system. And that can be done by, in just a moment, that can be done by speeding up the rollout of low-cost, homegrown, renewable technologies.
Former Prime Minister, she said the government's acted correctly, but the government's case is that energy prices are going up because of the war in Ukraine. Therefore, these profits are being earned because of the war in Ukraine. Why is it right to prioritise war profiteering and instead have a stealth tax on households?
What is right is to provide support for households who are worried about their energy bills. That's exactly what the government is doing. It's all about. Of course, if we are going to increase our use of renewables, and it is important that the price that people are paying for their electricity reflects the cost of that production and not the cost of gas. And I welcome again the fact that my right honourable friend, no, I'm going to make some progress. I'm going to make some progress on it. Can I say to my right honourable friend that I'm pleased that she's actually indicated that she's going to take action in relation to that particular matter. Can I also say that getting full benefit from this does mean upgrading the UK's power grid infrastructure. Alongside this, we do need to improve the energy efficiency of homes. And this would not just reduce demand for energy, saving people money, but again, it's an element that will help to save the planet. We do need to consider rolling out a significant home insulation programme. There is also... I will give way to my right honourable friend and then I'll give way to him.
I'm very grateful to my right honourable friend. Her government did indeed look very closely at the prospect of a tidal lagoon off Swansea Bay. And at that time, it is quite correct, as she says, that it was too expensive, although the price now looks relatively attractive. But does she agree with me that actually the real opportunity at the moment, which the current Chancellor has been very supportive of when he was at Bayes is for marine energy to come from tidal stream, which the new renewable auction is supporting, but there is much more that can be done, especially if we can affect the planning regulations around the pipeline of opportunity. Does she agree that there is more this government could do on that?
Yes, I absolutely agree with my honourable friend, and I welcome every opportunity to actually increase the diversity of our supply of energy, and looking at these new opportunities is absolutely a way to do that as well. I said I would give way to the right honourable gentleman.
Very grateful, and of course I completely support the tidal lagoon in Swansea, and I hope that that is now a real possibility for us. I hope the Prime Minister would accept that. But I just want to, and I agree with her about insulation. I think I understood the Prime Minister to say earlier that there was going to be protection for public services for just 6 months. Many local authorities, hospitals, schools are facing dramatically increased bills already. Aren't they going to need more support than just 6 months?
Say that I think the public sector will be very pleased to hear that the government has taken their concerns on board and is providing support for them. Can I also say, as another step that I think the government needs to take, it should look at regulations, building regulations. We are still building homes with gas boilers. Doesn't it make sense to actually change the regulations? Because those homes will have to be retrofitted in just a very few years' time. And surely it is more cost effective to take action now.
On that very point, which you give way for. I'm very...
Before, the honourable gentleman had one intervention. What I'm bothered about, there's a lot of people want to get it. I don't want to stifle the debate, but I want to make sure everybody gets a voice.
Yes, I apologise, Mr. Speaker, for being generous in interventions. The government is also key to driving greater private sector investment in low-carbon solutions. For instance, by we've already heard about some early-stage technologies and emerging sectors such as hydrogen production. Greater investor certainty cuts the cost of new technology, drives innovation, creates jobs and boosts economic growth. And the government's unequivocal support for this agenda would be a positive signal not just for our green tech industry, but for the ambition of the UK economy more broadly. Now, no, I'm just about to finish, so. People need help with their bills today. That is what the government is providing. But Britain led the world through the Industrial Revolution. If we grasp the opportunity now, we can lead the world in a cleaner, greener form of growth.
Hear, hear. We now come to the Leader of the SNP, Ian Blackford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I say it's a pleasure to follow the former Prime Minister, the Right Honourable Member for Maidenhead. And if I can just reflect back very briefly on the way that she behaved when she was Prime Minister, and I have to say the courtesy that she showed to opposition leaders, whether it was the then leader of the Labour Party or ourselves as a third party. And if I can gently say to the Prime Minister that some of the protocols of making sure that we had advanced sight of statements is important, and indeed that we're aware of when the Prime Minister would be coming to the Chamber to speak. I don't know if she's listening to any of that, but it would be helpful if that could be passed on. Mr. Speaker, at the start of the year, we were faced with an energy crisis. By the summer, it was an emergency. Right now, today, we're at the precipice of a humanitarian disaster. Because it's no longer a question of whether to heat or eat, when many households can no longer afford to do either.
Would the honourable gentleman give
let me make some progress on it, and I will. This cost crisis puts livelihoods and lives at risk. And all the while, as this disaster deepened, all summer, the Tories spent all their time desperately fighting amongst themselves, and the public were left desperately waiting for a real cost of living plan. We finally have a plan today, but I fear that when the public absorb the details, it will fall far short of what help they need. Now, we've heard today that the green levies are being scrapped, and that is something that is of deep concern to those of us on these benches, particularly given that the green levies fund the warm discount scheme and, of course, energy efficiency measures for low-income households. And I want to ask the government to make sure that that support will remain in place for those that need it. But, Mr. Speaker, the sheer scale of those soaring energy bills meant that there was never any question that households and businesses couldn't be able to pay the cost of energy bills. They were and they are unaffordable. If these prices weren't frozen, the bills simply couldn't have been paid. So freezing prices wasn't really a choice. It's the only political option. And when the current price cap stands at £2,000 with a 54% increase since spring, and many people are already unable to pay, setting the cap at £2,500 isn't an actual freeze. We know too that businesses, especially SMEs, are facing even sharper cost increases than households and an avalanche of insolvencies and redundancies is forecast. Many businesses simply could not have afforded to stay open. I will get to it.
Mr Speaker, I thank the right honourable gentleman for giving way. Reed's Bakery in my constituency, which supplies biscuits to the four corners of the world, is in danger of going bust by Christmas. So can I appeal to the government, in a spirit of inclusivity, to please look at the letter I've been sent by Reed's Bakery and to see what could be tailored to help a vital business in a remote part of the UK?
I agree with my honourable friend, my neighbouring MP, and indeed over the course of the last few weeks I've visited businesses in Ayrshire with my honourable friend, the member for Kilmarnock, and visited another bakery, Brownings, and in fact met with the industry body. And it's clear that bakers in particular are facing real struggles with the rise of energy and other costs. And it's critical that the government gives the details of what they're intending to support business. I'll take one more intervention, then I'll...
Grateful to the right honourable gentleman. On the question of the cap, the Prime Minister indicated that one of our reviews is going to be on regulation. Does the right honourable gentleman think it's time to take a serious look at the operations of Ofgem and, for a regulator, how much support they're giving to consumers, whether it's domestic consumers or businesses?
I think it's fair to say that the current regime is not fit for purpose, and it's why we're in the situation that we are today. So an urgent review of that is absolutely required. Mr Speaker, let me make some progress. Good businesses, profitable businesses, seeing a tsunami of cost increases with energy costs at the core of these, quite simply are facing a fight for survival. It is clear that today's plan does not go nearly far enough to mitigate the expected cost increase facing employers, and the UK Government needs to grasp the scale of this emergency.
I wish to say something about the announcement which has just been made about Her Majesty. I know I speak on behalf of the entire House when I say that we send our best wishes to Her Majesty the Queen, and that she and the royal family are in our thoughts and prayers at this moment. I'm going to take no more, if there is anything else, we will update the House accordingly. Thank you. Ian Blackford.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and I'm sure on behalf of all colleagues that we're saddened to hear the announcement that's been made, and the thoughts and prayers of all of us will be with Her Majesty the Queen and indeed with the royal family. Mr Speaker, in reality, the one big political question, the real question, was how today's plan would be paid for and who would pay for it. And ever since the new Prime Minister took office, we've been waiting for these answers. But after all the waiting, it couldn't be any clearer. She set it out very brazenly. The Prime Minister's plan means that the public pays. She has made the political choice to tax families instead of companies, to put profit over people. Instead of a windfall tax, she's chosen a new Tory tax. The trust tax. The trust tax that means that in the months and years ahead, households and businesses will be punished with higher bills, higher interest rates and higher mortgage costs. A trust tax means it cuts to the vital public services people rely on and which are used to support the most vulnerable. A trust tax means a threat to the Scottish budget, which the Scottish Government is using to protect our population and shield workers and public services as best they can.
Will my honourable friend give way?
I will give way.
I'm grateful to the honourable gentleman for giving way. He seems to be making an argument for a windfall tax on the oil and gas companies. And given that the Leader of the Opposition wasn't able to answer this question, they already pay 65% on their profits. What would he rather see that tax set at?
I'm grateful for that intervention, and if he just bears with me, I'm going to come to that very specific point. But that issue of who pays is important, because there is no... Well, actually, I will do, and you might actually show some respect if you don't mind. Because at the end of the day, Oil and gas producers are making windfall profits. Our constituents, his constituents, are suffering. And it's right, Mr. Speaker, that we look at the contribution that those making windfall profits will make. And I will come to that. I'm going to make a little bit of progress because I'm conscious that others want to get in. Mr. Speaker, the frightening bit for people is that the new Prime Minister made this choice on day one in the job. Because on day one, we saw the pound slip to a low not seen since the Thatcher years, knocked by the UK's worsening economic outlook. On day one, her first major decision as Prime Minister will see big business profits prioritised over family budgets. And on day one, we can already predict that the trust tax paid for by households for the years to come will be the Prime Minister's enduring legacy, eating away at household budgets long after she and her party have been voted out of office. If day one was that bad, you couldn't blame people for fearing that the worst is yet to come. Mr. Speaker, the decision not to bring in an additional windfall tax is the biggest and the worst political choice in this plan. Because let's look at Shell and BP as an example. Now, I want corporates to be able to be profitable to invest, to create jobs and to finance a green transition. But there is a difference between a fair profit and an excess windfall or excess profit. Mr. Speaker, Shell's first-half profits were up by 177% to $25.2 billion. Shell were making excess profits to such an extent they brought back shares worth $8.5 billion and declared that they would buy back a further $6 billion worth of shares between July and September. If you want the example of where the excess profit is, Mr. Speaker, then there it is. In total, this means that $14.5 billion of excess profits not being invested in green energy projects, money that's been generated from high energy prices, that our constituents and our businesses have to pay. That is the reality. Then let's take a look at British Petroleum. Q2 profits up from $3.1 billion to $9.2, and a share buyback for this quarter of $3.5 billion. You know, Mr. Speaker, quite frankly, that will disgust our constituents, that money has been given back to shareholders at a time that people quite simply can't afford to put their heating on. These are global corporates, but we can and should fairly tax their UK activities. So why on earth is the Prime Minister failing to bring in a fair windfall tax? Why are ordinary people right across these islands ultimately going to have to foot these bills? Why does her plan not address that real issue? Mr. Speaker, this energy plan is not only defined by the choice it makes to make the public pay instead of the excess profits of massive corporations. It is also defined by its glaring omissions, because there is no proper plan to help those that are already struggling. Support needs to be targeted to low-income households and those negatively impacted by spiralling costs, such as unpaid carers, larger households and disabled people. In Scotland, we are already prioritising this support to the most vulnerable. The Scottish Government is doing what it can, freezing rents, banning evictions, freezing train fares, expanding free school meals to Primary 6 and Primary 7. That's a government acting with compassion.
I'd like to thank my honourable friend for making the most valid point, that the working people across these islands will be paying for generations to come for this borrowing, for excess greed, described by the UN Secretary-General as utterly grotesque and immoral, to be making excess profits on the back of fossil fuels. And what I've heard from this government today is more of the same. The question I want to ask is, has the government put any conditions, despite their ideology that profits must be made regardless, have they put any conditions on these excess profits on what they're going to do